This is a video for homework 6, problem 7, and here we are asked to determine the least squares regression line and then compute the sum of the squared residuals for that least square regression line. So first of all, I'm just going to show the completed problem so we can kind of compare our answers and see where these are coming from. The easiest way to compute your least squares regression line is to go to StatCrunch. So you're going to click this little blue box here and open your data set in StatCrunch. So as that loads here, after we load this, it's going to go to stat. We can go to, regression, and then simple linear. And here you just have to decide which one's your x variable, which one's your y variable. So here they are labeled x and y for us. And then because we do want to get those, the sum of the squared residuals afterwards, what we can do down here, a little bit of a trick, is we can save the residuals. And this is going to create a nice new column for us that will actually do the residuals. I'm going to explain what a residual is in a second. And then we click compute. Okay, so here what you'll see, let me just make this a little bit bigger. Here what you'll see is that we have our correlation, right? We have the actual least squares regression line, so y equals 117.9 minus 0.73x, and let's see if that's what they got here. And you can see that they're putting the 0.73x first, but you just want to put that in the right spot, and they're rounding to 4 decimal places is needed, but this one only went to 2 and to 1, so that's why we don't have 4 decimal places. Now, the way that your calculator and the way that StatCrunch computes the least squares regression line is it actually takes a look at residuals, and it looks at the sum of the squares of the residuals. So I'm just going to key over here. If you look down here, there's a little arrow, right? If we key over to the arrow, you can see the scatter plot. So what a residual is the distance from the actual value to the predicted value, right? So the predicted value should be right here where my cursor is, and you can see that there's a pretty good, that pink line is the distance between the predicted value on the line and the actual value, which is the dot. Now what we could actually do here is create a square. I'm just going to pretend to create a square here. It's not going to be perfect, okay? Create a square that has the same, again, because it's a square, it has all 4 sides being the same. And that would be a square. The area would be the square of the residual because each side is the residual, the same length, right? And now what your program here does is it goes to each one of these points, it finds the residual, and it creates that square. And it's looking to get the least possible sum for those squared residuals, for these like squares that are happening here. So like over here, you're going to get a really tiny square, which is kind of nice. And over here, you'll get a pretty small square as well. Okay, so they're looking to get those smallest squares as possible. Okay, now how can we actually find that? So first of all, if you look back here, and I see that it's pink because I've highlighted certain things. Let me see if I can unhighlight here. You can see that it's created a column for us that gives the residuals. So here, for example, the predicted value, this is the actual value of 98. The predicted value was something different, but it was 2 away from that predicted value. Okay, so these are your residuals. Now you can compute the sum of the square of the residuals here in StatCrunch. So the first thing we want to do is square all of these values. Okay, so what you're going to do is going to go to the next column here. I'm going to go to data. I'm going to click compute, and I'm going to click expression. Okay, now here what we do is we have to put an expression in here for it to do for us. We're going to click build. Okay, now we want the square of the residuals. So I'm going to click residuals here. See how it has the columns? So I'll click residuals. You may have to double click. And then I want to square that. So the way that you do that here is you press this little up button. It's also called a caret. And we raise it to the 2nd power. And click OK. And click compute. And here is the residuals squared. Okay, so you can see it's squared each value. 2 squared is 4, 0.3 squared is 0.09, etc. Now we want to take the sum of these values, because again, we want the sum of the squared residuals. So again, I'm going to click over in this other column. I'm going to press data. I'm going to press compute, and I'm going to do another expression. Okay, and I'm going to build this expression here. Now I want to take the sum of the square of the residuals. So I'm going to go over here to functions, and I'm going to scroll down until I find sum. So let's find our sum here. It should be under the S's. And here I have sum. So you can see it's opening some parentheses for me. I want the sum of the residual squared, so I'm going to click the residual square column and press OK. And then click compute. And here you can see we're getting 94.3, which should be, what we got here. Okay, so it's a little easier once you learn how to compute in StatCrunch than having to do it all in your calculator. I mean, if you wanted to do it in your calculator, once you have the residuals saved, you just have to square them and then add them all up. But again, you can also do that in StatCrunch. Let me know if you have any more questions on this one.